How George Washington went from farmer to president. George Washington was a reserved, ambitious, brave, and serious man with the occasionally explosive temper. During his time, he liked farming, bred the first mules in America, had a passion for interior decoration, and was an excellent horseman. Experience taught Washington many things. The death of his father at a very young age denied Washington the chance for a college education. Instead of libraries and lecture halls, his place of learning were the wildernesses of the Virginia frontier and the unforgiving campgrounds of the Valley Forge. Follow us as we go over Washington's journey, from his humble beginnings to his time as a general and commander-in-chief of the colonial armies, and eventually his tenure as the first president of the United States. Early days. Washington was born to a prosperous planter on the 2nd of February 1732 in the British colony of Virginia as the first of 6 children. Little is known about his early education, though it was common for children from prosperous families to be homeschooled by private tutors. However, any hope for attending college was dashed when Washington's father died in 1744, leaving Washington to assist his mother in tending to the plantation. Despite their now modest means, Washington's mother, Mary, did the best that she could to provide for her children with improvised education. Although she could hardly afford it, Mary loaned Washington money for dancing lessons because she knew that it was an essential skill to earn his entrance into the elite Virginia society. As Washington grew into a teenager, so did his aptitude for mathematics, which led to his becoming a surveyor and successful one at that matter. His surveying odyssey into the wilderness of Virginia earned him enough money to begin his land acquisition, as well as paying his mother back for, among other things, those dancing lessons. When Washington turned 19, he made his first voyage outside America to Barbados with his older half-brother Lawrence, who was sick with tuberculosis, in the hope that a warmer climate would help him. Unfortunately for Washington, not long after they arrived, he contracted smallpox, which sadly left him with permanent scars on his face. 1 year later, Lawrence died, leaving his estate on the Potomac River close to Alexandria, Virginia, to young Washington. War and farming. In the late 1752, Washington, an inexperienced boy in the arts of war, was drafted into the military as commander of the Virginia militia. He was involved in the French and Indian War and was eventually made colonel of the Virginia Regiment in 1755. Only in his early 20s, Washington accepted the commission with full confidence of his prospects for success, as had been the case for every endeavor he had passed through before then. He was once heard boasting to a friend that, "I doubt not, but you have heard of the ravages committed by our inhuman foes on the back inhabitants. I am now upon my march against them, with full hopes that I shall be able to get satisfaction for their cruel barbarities." This youthful arrogance would soon give way to humbling experiences, as Washington would later lament, and I quote, "I have been posted upon our cold and barren frontiers to perform, I think I may say, impossibilities. That is, to protect from the cruel incursions of a crafty savage enemy, a line of inhabitants of more than 350 miles extent, but a force inadequate to the task." Throughout this war, the young colonel suffered through a painful variety of harsh realities and learned lessons that would be summoned to his aid during his time as the United States President. Washington's controversial relationship with his mother. Washington's mother was a misunderstood woman, partly due to her physically imposing nature and explosive temper. From training her children in the art of tea serving and drinking to paying their way through dance classes, as time passed and money grew even tighter despite the number of slaves working on the farm, Mary was forced to write to Washington to ask for small amounts of money. In letters sent to his mother throughout his youth, Washington addressed his mother as "Honored Madam," a term that was most interpreted as a lack of affection but showed his respect and courtesy towards her. During Washington's time as part of the Continental Army, Mary's apparent disinterest in his military occupation was interpreted as disapproval by others, but it was highly likely that she simply dreaded war and was worried for her son's safety like any other mother, though she had a strange way of showing it, as Mary went about 5 years without seeing Washington and didn't write a letter to him until 1782, in which she described how uneasy she had felt. Others may have seen Mary as a large and vigorous single mother who only remembered her successful son in times of need, but she was a strong-willed woman who instilled discipline and skills in Washington that he would take with him all his life. Unknown to Washington, Mary had breast cancer, and the last time he would see her alive was during his visit on his way to his presidential inauguration in 1789. Washington in the love scandal. 1758. A 26-year-old Washington wrote a love letter to the wife of his close friend and neighbor, Sally Carey Fairfax, about 4 months after he was engaged to the richest widow in Virginia at the time, Martha Dandridge Custis. It was said that Washington held passionate love for Sally for a great many years, even though they were both married to different people. No one knows if Sally felt the same way. The only hint we may have is the fact that the love letter was found in her possession after her death more than 50 years later. Imagine the consternation among Americans who had regarded Washington as a virtual incarnation of divinity when the letter was discovered all those years later. Washington and the American Revolution. As the late 1760s rolled by, Washington experienced firsthand the effects of increased taxes that had been imposed on the Americans by the British and believed that it was best for the American colonists to obtain their independence from England. In 1774, Washington himself served as a delegate to the First Continental Congress, and by the time the Second Congress took place a year later, the American Revolution was in full swing, and Washington earned the title of Commander-in-Chief of the Army. It was in this position that he would realize his potential as a general and understand that his strengths lay in his ability to keep his struggling colonial army together. Even though his troops were lacking food, ammunition, essential supplies, and training, Washington harnessed the lessons he had learned during the Indian War and was able to motivate the troops and gave them direction to continue the fight. At the end of the war, Washington was declared a national hero. Becoming president and retirement. Time passed and Washington was forced by popular public opinion to run for the presidency, which he won hands down in 1789. During his time as president, Washington achieved many things, faced many disappointments, chief of which was his inability to preserve the integrity of the Indian lands, a situation that will take the United States in a direction that he expressly wanted to avoid. As the cycle of violence rapidly escalated, Washington was compelled to resolve the matter with force. This would end up becoming a great regret for Washington. In 1796, Washington retired to Mount Vernon and devoted himself to rebuilding the plantation. 3 years later, he caught a cold that developed into a throat infection, which eventually killed him that same year. Washington was a great man, and he will be forever remembered. Thank you very much for watching our videos. We'd like to give you another interesting video for you to enjoy next, but before then, our team will be very happy if you can share it with your friends on social media. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss other interesting videos like this. Look at your screen now to see 2 other interesting videos we handpicked for you to enjoy next. We love you.